With the rise in social media, I really think that there's just like this extra challenge as moms. There's this perception always out there of the perfect mom and everything that you need to do to be a perfect mom, and how we're constantly never like measuring up and that we're always failing. And as a mom that I have naturally just like grown up with these expectations of feeling like I need to be perfect, I've really been reflecting on this need to be and feel perfect over like this last year, and just looking into the year ahead. I thought that this would be a perfect time to just kind of like sit down and reflect on what it is that I want to change and the struggles that I've gone through with trying to be a perfect mom, what I'm giving up and changing so that way I can be a little bit more present and more engaged, and just let go of like the expectation that I have on myself from not only social media but also my upbringing on what a perfect mom needs to be. If you can relate to anything that I've kind of just like mentioned and we haven't hung out before, my name is Brianna. I'm a fellow mom and money coach, and here we talk about money and real life. And today's episode is more of just like a reflection on stuff that I've been thinking about. Most of the time, we answer questions from other moms and kind of share our stories and experiences. But I thought that this would just be a great time to kind of like let you into what I'm kind of feeling and experiencing personally right now in this stage of my life, especially looking into the new year. So, as I did mention already, like I have always really struggled with feeling the need to be perfect. And I know that a lot of this comes from my upbringing and just like my toxic relationship with my dad. Now, I can say that my mom did a really good job, like setting a really good example for just like the reality of what it is being a mom, and I have so much respect for her. But there's also some things that growing up that she did that I felt, because of like this natural feeling like I have to be perfect, everything has to be done to the exact degree of perfection, otherwise you're not accepted, you're not valued, you're not like you have no worth. From my relationship with my dad, because I saw so many things done so well by my mom, I felt like I had to exactly model everything that she did in her life to be able to be a perfect mom. And now that I am a mom and several years into my mom journey, I'm realizing that not only that's not realistic, but also like my mom was a completely different person than I am. And it's unrealistic for me to have the same expectations that I would meet that things that my mom did when I'm a different person. I have different circumstances, different variables on my life, and also like different passions and different ways that I want to spend my time. So for example, it felt like everything always had its place, like it was always clean. Like my mom always made homemade meals for us. Now, was there the occasional time that we did eat out? Yes, but we also had a really large family, so it was not the norm to eat out. My mom really exemplified a lot of frugal, like money management systems. So I grew up with certain like expectations of the ways and things that I needed to run my household because I saw those demonstrated by my mom. So part of it was like very subliminal things, like things that are just like, oh, well, I'm doing it this way because this is how my mom did it. This is how I expected to do it. And now that I am grown and my circumstances are completely different from my mom's, like I have fewer kids, I do work outside of the home. And there was a short period of time where my mom did work outside of the home, but for the majority of my childhood, she was a full-time stay-at-home mom. So it's unrealistic for me to expect that my motherhood tasks are going to exactly mirror the tasks that my mom had, since she didn't work outside of the home. She was home full-time. And even when the short period of time where I was home full time, I came to realize that I did not enjoy a lot of those tasks that were kind of like required and expected of me. And when I say expected of me, it's because like I put those expectations on myself as from a reflection of what I saw my mom do, that I was like, okay, I need to do these things because this is what makes a good mom, because my mom was so good to me. Now, let's just also take a moment to pause here and realize like the curated mom and the motherhood like version that appears in social media right now. Like everyone shows like the perfect image of themselves. And I do think, thankfully, like over the last couple of years, a lot of moms, and there's just been a change in content, that there's more like this raw, authentic, more relatable content where it's like, hey, let's also share our struggles and our challenges. But I think that that is so much more minor in relation to like, here's the perfect curated vision of all these snipped together clips of, like this background music creating the ambience. And that's not what we experience in our, everyday life when we're in the trenches, actually like trying to get dinner on the table and our kids are screaming in the background and our house is a mess and laundry is piling over, out of the laundry basket, and the bathroom is crazy, and don't let any visitors possibly come in the door because like you would be ashamed of what my house would look like, right? Like we see these other like expectations of what we envision of all these curated clips or these unrealistic expectations. For example, the things that I had, that it was like, okay, if you don't look perfect, if your motherhood perfection of what you feel like you should measure up to isn't perfect, then you're failing. And I have felt so much failure as a mom, and realizing and just like reflecting a lot on that over this past year is like, well, why do I feel like a failure? Are these unrealistic expectations that I have of myself? Where are those expectations coming from? And kind of like already knowing a lot of like, wow, I do have childhood trauma. I have, walked through the path of like forgiveness and like really working through all of that. But even as we work through some of those things, like that doesn't mean that those experiences never affect or impact our current life today. So these are some things that I'm trying to change to just be a little bit more present and give myself more grace as a mom. And also like realizing that these are some things that I hope by me talking and sharing about them, that you can also feel like, hey, it's okay if you don't measure up and you're not perfect too. The first thing that I really had to realize was the fact that in my perfectionism, like I am also naturally very much like a task-oriented person. Like it's very much like, okay, do this, do this, do this, do this. And as a mom, when it comes to our tasks, like it doesn't feel like when we do something that, because the same, like for example, when you do a load of laundry, the next day there's another load of laundry. So it doesn't feel like you have completed that task. And for me, it was like, I'm just struggling so much because as soon as I wash dishes and I make dinner, then there's another amount of dishes to do. And so there's like no way of obtaining perfectionism because there's like the task always continues to repeat itself, and then it feels like as a mom that I'm never accomplishing anything because the task keeps repeating, like we're stuck in this hamster wheel. And knowing that I'm also dealing with this unrealistic expectation of me to be able to run a perfect house and have a perfect home and measure up to all of these perfectionist ideals that I have of myself isn't realistic. So how can I give myself more grace? Because I recognize that I am so task oriented that I would often feel like annoyed or like peeved when I would get interrupted or when I wasn't able to completely finish my task. And I was recognizing that I was like very mentally absent from the fact that like I was just thinking about the next thing. And even though there would be certain things that I would love and I would enjoy and I would just like be so passionate and excited about doing, even in those moments, like my work, for example, like I would come home from work and my mind would still be thinking about like, okay, I need to do this tomorrow. I need to do that tomorrow. And like thinking about like, okay, how can I help this client? And I'm really excited to like talk with them about this and, try and like work with them to solve this problem or this issue. And I recognize that even though I find gratification in that, because I'm so mentally wrapped up in all of those things, that I realized that I wasn't being mentally present with my kids. And I've found that and feeling the struggle of like, okay, how do I get more balance? How do I actually create like time where I can really be present with them? Because my concern, like looking ahead into their years, is like I don't want my kids growing up and then feeling like yeah, I was there, but I really wasn't there. I wasn't mentally there. I wasn't really ready or available to them. And I think that when my kids were infants, like that kind of makes sense. And I feel like I'm going to give myself some grace in the fact that because they're so young, they sleep so much and they're, just like there's so much downtime with them. Like I think I naturally got into the habit of being mentally checked out because I would take care of their needs. There would be a very short interaction window where I would interact with them and then they're sleeping or they're napping or they're interacting with another toy, and because they don't need quite as much and they're occupied a little bit easier, then I'm able to finish that task. And I found that as my kids got older, that I actually became more irritable and irritated that I would be interrupted while completing my task and trying to like just feeling like, oh, I can't get anything done. And then because I couldn't accomplish anything, I was like feeling like I was failing as a mom because again, I was trying to measure myself up to that level of perfectionism of, well, if I'm going to be a good mom, then I have to complete these things and my house has to look this way, or I have to, make a homemade meal and I have to like make sure that the laundry basket is clean and everything has to be folded and put away, and all of these expectations, these unrealistic expectations that I had on myself to be able to like consider myself a good mom, where now I'm realizing that it's not so much the things that I do for my kids, that it's more about like the routines and the systems that we do to constantly create the like the culture of being present and being available to them, even if it is shorter snippets of time, because it's unrealistic for us to expect to like, oh, we're always going to be present, we're always going to be engaged, like we're always going to drop everything at as soon as they need something, right? Like that's not realistic either. But how can I create a culture in my home that when they get older and they move on with their lives, that they don't look back on their childhood and say like, well, yeah, my mom was there, but she was never really there. And that's honestly like something that I fear as a parent. And I'm like, okay, like that's not good either. And recognizing that that was kind of like the trajectory that I was going on if I didn't make a change. So with all of that kind of like being in the back of my mind and recognizing like, oh, these are big failures, these are big faults. How can I address them and pivot and make a change that in a way that does feel realistic, that does give myself grace, that also is going to like be able to meet the needs of my kids, but also like make sure that there are normal things in my household and normal things that I need to accomplish as an adult. So now that I've identified everything that I want to change and the problem really and why I am the way that I am, this is really my best opportunity to be like, okay, well, what is realistic? What does make sense? What can I change that won't feel so much like it's a check mark? Because I don't want it to become another like task to be like, okay, you need to do this thing. Otherwise, if you don't do this thing and this thing and this thing every day, then you're failing. Because again, knowing that I struggle with perfectionism, I didn't want to necessarily give myself like another task to do every day. I wanted it more to be like feel more natural into like, oh, this is just who I'm becoming as a mom. This is like a part of my character, or this is a value that we have in our home, and they're just like part of the natural like rhythm and routine, even if it is more like systematic at first. And I wanted some of these areas where I knew I was lacking to just like be a natural part of our week. So it became a natural part of our routine. So I didn't necessarily have to think about, okay, well, we need to make sure we accomplish this every day. That is just like a natural part of our rhythm for the day. And then also it would be, if I felt like approaching it that way too gave me a little bit more grace to know like, okay, if it doesn't happen that day, that is okay. Like it's not something for me to just like check off and complete, to be like, okay, I did that task, like yep, I'm measuring up, or no, I'm not measuring up. Which is completely against the whole like setting smart goals, because you want to set goals that are measurable. Whereas this is not like, I'm trying to deviate away, knowing that there are certain struggles that I have personally with like feeling that perfection, feeling like everything has to be measurable to be perfect, to be validated, to be, accepted and loved, to knowing like, okay, the end result is not the goal. The habit is the goal. So with that in mind, one of the things that I really wanted to try to do with my kids, since I was noticing that when I was coming home that I wasn't mentally present, I decided that when I get home from work every weekday, the time from dinner until their bedtime, I'm going to say attempt, because I don't want to look at this as like such in black and white situations and give myself grace, but that's going to be like dedicated family time. So I'm going to try to not look at my phone unless it is something as it relates to, what we're talking about. And that way I can just really focus on my sons during that time frame, that this is the time where I get to hear about their day, I get to interact with them. And some of the ways that we're kind of more doing that is to, when we sit down to dinner, I'm trying to be more intentional about like asking them about their day. Like, what did they learn in school? What did they do when their schoolwork was done? What did they do with their dad that day? And giving them more of an opportunity to just like talk and express themselves, because I want to set certain like cultural expectations, like relational expectations, because every home has a different culture. Like, I don't want them growing up to just like, when we sit down to dinner, they're so engrossed in their phones. Like, if that's something that I don't want them doing as teenagers, then I need to set that example now in my own life as an adult. So that way they naturally it would feel weird within the culture of our home that when they get to that place where they have their own cell phones and we sit down to dinner, like it would feel like completely odd for someone to be on their phone. And the only way to really establish that feeling is if I stop doing that now. So kind of in relation to that, after dinner, I've been trying to also like help encourage them and try to work them more into like the daily habits of our like running our household, because I have found that a lot of my expectation has fallen on me, like, oh, I have to do this, or I have to clean this, or I have to like put those things away. And my sons right now are 4 and 6, and they're going to be turning a year older this year, just like every other one's kids. And they're at the age where they are really interested in being involved, and they can also start to be involved in super simple tasks. So trying to like it become an established routine that like, okay, well, take your plates over to the counter when you're done, which they already do, but just like letting them help clean up after dinner and helping them be involved a little bit more so it doesn't all fall on me and my husband, and working them a little bit more into like the chores that we do on the weekends. So that way it's not so much the fact of like, okay, don't bother me, I'm doing my chores, which it has been in the past, like that's my fault, but more so like, okay, we're going to do laundry, so gather up all your laundry and put it in the laundry basket, or we're going to fold laundry, so here's a few things that you can fold, or here's things to, go put away in your closet. Kind of more so relying on them to be more involved and more helpful, because not only is that really good skills for them to be able to acquire to be, like adults and working members of the household, but also like it'll be less on me and my husband. And I think that it will also help pull them into the tasks that I am doing. So it doesn't feel like there's like this huge disconnect where it's like, okay, I need you to stay out of the realm of what I'm doing. And I need that so that way I can keep you safe. Like it has been in the past, especially when I'm making their meals. Right, like I have a knife on the counter and I have a hot pan on the stove and I'm working in the oven, and the rule has just been like, when we're cooking, you stay out of the kitchen for your own safety. And they're to the point where now it's like, no, I can start inviting them in. And so I want to be a little bit more intentional about we're helping them be part of whatever task it is that I'm doing. Now, will there still be tasks that I can't have them involved in? Of course, but trying to be more intentional about the fact of like, they are at the age where they can do simple tasks, they can do simple chores, they can be part of learning these things, so that way we are working alongside of each other to help build and cultivate that relationship that I have with my son. So it doesn't feel like, oh, mom has always been around, but she's not ever really interested in what I'm doing, or like, leave her alone. She just takes care of all of the stuff type of thing. And now that they're a little bit older, like sometimes like nighttime is chaos. Like, can you, like, any moms out there, you can probably relate to the fact of like when it's not just like easily tuck them and put them into bed. No, it's like they're running around their room. There's like, what is it about bedtime that all of a sudden kids get a sudden burst of energy? Like, I don't understand it. So it's always like this, like, it's always super fun, but it's just like corralling them and like getting them into bed. And part of me has been like, well, maybe I just need to embrace the like corralled chaos a little bit. So for Christmas, from my mom, we actually got indoor snowballs. And one of the things that we've been doing now, because like everywhere else in the house is the rule of like, don't throw toys, because I don't want something to be broken, right? That's not a good like manager of their things. But in their rooms, they don't have anything hung on the walls, and like there's nothing that I need to be concerned about them breaking with these, projectile indoor snowballs. So we have started having a snowball fight before they go to bed. And not only has this given them the opportunity to like release some of that pre-bed energy, but it also is like creating this like super fun, I don't know, just like moment where we are creating memories. And if it starts to become like a thing where, okay, this is what we do every night before bed, it's just like going to be a normal part of our routine where I am relating and connecting with them, and we're all doing something together as a fun activity, because my husband also participates, and it has been quite the adventure so far. So having that window of like, okay, this is dinner time to bedtime, I think that there's enough touch points throughout those like 2 or 3 hours where I am present and participating with them. And then on the weekends, taking one-on-one time with them and participating with them in an activity that they enjoy, but also that I enjoy, because they're going to be at a point in their adult lives where they're going to have to do and participate in something that maybe someone else enjoys just as much as them. And having that dedicated one-on-one time with them to like really feel like, okay, I am engaged, I am present. So that way they know like, okay, well, this is the time when mommy's busy and working on stuff to also take care of our home and run our family, like, and knowing that it's not just all like, okay, we'll do it later. Oh, I don't have time. Like, sorry, we didn't get to it today. I was too busy, because that was what was happening. And then at the end of the day, like, yeah, I would accomplish things, but there would be this huge task list of stuff like, okay, well, you didn't do this, this, and this, and your house doesn't look perfect, and you didn't also relate to your sons, so you are failing as a mom. So I am hoping that by approaching these like time blocks of my day, of my life, of knowing like, okay, this is starting to become like just an established routine, I am investing in their life. I am investing in the aspects that are important as a mom, and I am being present while also letting go of the fact that my life doesn't have to look perfect. I don't have to do the same things that my mom did, because I have different circumstances as my mom. Like, I don't have to measure up to what society or what I am seeing in social media as what a perfect mom is, because that's unrealistic, and I need to let some of that go. One of the other things that I'm really trying to change how I've approached is more so related to my health. So my best friend just turned 40, and I am not too far behind her. And she was just kind of telling me like, wow, your life is different once you turn 40. And growing up, I never saw my mom work out. Well, that's not true. Every once in a while, I would see her do like a workout video, but she was always so slim. And I have had, I'm sure, as like most other women out there, most moms, I also have dealt with like body image issues and like struggling with feeling like, okay, I have to look a certain way or I have to feel a certain way, and like wanting to feel like, okay, if I'm going to measure up, I have to, do these routines and I have to work out every single day. My workout has to look like this, except, like it has to be this one thing. Otherwise, I'm failing because I haven't met what my goal is. And looking at the past few weeks with just like Christmas and the fact that things are different than normal around the holiday season, waking up and eating cookies for breakfast, I'm just like, okay, I need to stop that, first of all. But also, like, what is a realistic way for me to like take care of myself and my body, and just like also give myself grace in the fact that I want to embrace my age and the fact that I want to look at growing older with respect. Like the fact that like I'm already getting gray hairs and I'm like, why my hair is already gray? Why is it already gray? And then I think about like, oh yeah, that's probably pretty normal. And just like allowing myself to really respect the laugh front lines and the wrinkles, but also really cherish the fact that I need to respect my body and I need to give my body the best success to be able to live the life that I want to have and have the most longevity to be able to be present for my kids, but also potentially my, grandkids in the future. Like, I don't want to get to a certain age and feel like, okay, my mobility is completely gone and like I can't still, like do certain like feeling limited in my opportunities because I am limited in my mobility. If I am going to start like a workout routine, that it really needs to be focused on creating the habit, but not necessarily reaching a goal. Because in the past, it's like, oh, well, I've set a goal to like, I want to lose 1 pound, this often. And then if I don't meet, my goal, then I'm feeling really defeated and just like that I'm not measuring up. And then just like I give up because I'm just like, oh, well, what was the point? Well, the point is creating the habit. When does that make sense to work it into my routine? When does that make sense that it's just going to naturally fit into what my life looks like right now? And also what activity naturally fits in the time that I have available. And making sure that I'm choosing something not necessarily because it's like, this is my ideal, this is what I should be doing, but like, this is what's realistic and what I enjoy. Because if I'm going to enjoy it, then I'm going to do it. So the simplest thing that I have that is because I do enjoy is my husband got me a treadmill for Christmas, which I used to have one. I absolutely enjoy running, but I don't always enjoy it when I start or when I'm actually running. But overall, I enjoy that enough. Sometimes I realize that the barrier is like, okay, well, knowing that I need to work out and I know that I want to run and then I want to run for this amount of time or I want to run for this amount of distance. And there are just days when I wake up and I'm just like, okay, I don't feel like doing that, or it does not feel like I have the energy to run that length of time. And then I don't end up doing it because it's like, well, what's the point of doing it if I can't, do my goal, and if I can't like put that little check mark to say like, okay, I worked out for the amount of time that I wanted, right? I'm trying to change my expectations going into the year to be like, okay, it doesn't matter how long I work out for. It matters that I worked out. If the only thing that I do is I put on my workout clothes and I just walk for 5 minutes, that is enough. Because what I'm focused on right now is I'm focused on building the habit instead of like completing the goal, completing that daily task. The task is do it. It doesn't matter how it looks. It doesn't matter what the end result is. What matters is actually completing the action, not necessarily gaining the result. Because the reality is if I continue doing the action of working out, I will end up getting results. I will end up eventually getting there. It will end up creating a habit. I'm gonna the natural way things work is you will eventually get better. You will eventually improve. Like I will gain more speed and endurance and better, muscle tone. But if that's the expectation I have on myself, because I struggled so much in the past with perfectionism, it's It's releasing the expectation of myself that I have to be perfect and I have to do it this way and it has to look like this. Otherwise, you're failing. And then what is the point? So, really, ultimately, my goal looking into this upcoming year is to recognize that it is not perfection in motherhood. It's being present and knowing that, and giving myself grace to know that as things change, because they will, that it is ultimately, it's going to be okay, because I will be the best mom that I can be by constantly evaluating and pivoting and changing to be able to become the best person that I can be, so that way I can be the best person to my family. And I hope that if you can relate to anything that I said in this episode, that you just feel encouraged too, that it doesn't necessarily matter what your life looks like. It matters how you show up.